And now we'll recognize Ms. Souser. Can I call you Mackenzie? Okay, I know you probably got some butterflies in your stomach. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. But first thing, make sure you turn your mic on, pull it up close to you. It's going to be a breeze for you. I can tell you that there's only one person in the room that's got more nerves going on in their stomach than you, and that's your mother. I've been watching her over there. So just take your time. Don't be rushed. You're going to probably hear some bells go off in the middle when you're speaking. Don't panic. It's not going to be a fire alarm.
Okay.
There you go.
Thank you.
But again, just take your time, take a deep breath, and go ahead and proceed whenever you're ready.
Okay. My name is Mackenzie Souser, and I'm from Camarillo, California, and I just wanted to thank you for inviting me here today. My dad, Doyle Souser, an executive at a manufacturing company, left work on the afternoon of Friday, September 12th, and boarded the Metrolink 111 train to come home from work. He usually took the later train, but was coming home early to cook a barbecue dinner for a struggling family in our community. I was excited because my 13th birthday party was scheduled for the next day. My dad always helped with all the details of our family events. After dinner on Friday, we were going to finish the rest of the preparations for my party. Instead, on that Friday afternoon, my dad's train, which was filled with passengers, collided head-on at full speed with a freight train on a bend in Chatsworth in Los Angeles County. The 80-mile-per-hour force caused the Metrolink locomotive to completely enter the first passenger car and ignite into flames. 24 hours later, we learned that my dad was riding in the front of the first car and was one of the 24 passengers killed. The Chatsworth Metrolink collision was the worst ever in California's history. In addition to all the people who died, more than 135 others were injured, many seriously and permanently. The survivors of the crash, which not only include those who were injured, but those of us who are trying to make it each day without someone we depended on, did not refer to this event as an accident. It really was not just an accident. According to the National Transportation Safety Board, the collision was caused when the engineer of the Metrolink train, Robert Sanchez, ran through a red signal while using his personal cell phone to send text messages. The NTSB also determined that the engineer, an employee of Veolia Transportation and Conic, sent and received 43 text messages and made 3 phone calls while on duty on the day of the crash. 2 days before the collision, the Veolia engineer sent or received 125 text messages during the time he was responsible for operating the train. He would regularly send and receive an average of 180 text messages each day. Many of the texts the engineers typed were sent to teenage boys he was communicating with. The engineer had recently invited a teenager for a ride-along in the cabin with him and allowed him to have contact with the controls. The engineer had been planning on letting the same teenager actually drive the train on the evening of the collision. Within a few minutes and a few text messages, my life was changed. My family's life was changed, and over 160 other families' lives were changed drastically by this avoidable disaster. I'm telling you this because I would never want anyone to go through the same traumatic loss as I have for the past 2.5 years. I'm simply not a normal teenager anymore without my dad. The best part of every day was when my dad came home from work and our family would have dinner together. I struggle every day with the fact that my dad, who was the sole breadwinner for our family, isn't coming home ever again.
Take your time.
Sorry.
It's all right. Take your time. Want some water?
Sorry. My dad was my best friend and a strong Christian influence who helped me become a responsible young adult. I miss spending time with him and talking about cars and watching cooking TV shows, going to movies, playing in our backyard, and discussing many other things. I miss joining him at work for Father-Daughter Day, which he would let me do when I wanted to spend the day with him. I remember observing the great relationship my mom and dad shared. It was a wonderful example of a beautiful marriage. I hope someday to find a husband that will treat me like my dad treated my mom. My loss is not only physical, but it is also emotional. My dad was also my brother Zach's best friend. It is so hard to watch my brother trying to grow up without his best buddy and male role model. Others my age get to worry about normal teenage concerns while I worry about my mom, our family finances, and our future, and how my brother and I will go to college. I worry about what we would do if someone broke into our home during the night or if there was ever a fire. And it's hard knowing that my dad will not be there to walk my older sister Kelsey or me down the aisle when we get married or be here for us ever again. As a teenager, I am very familiar with the popularity of text messaging. Every teenager I meet should know that driving and texting do not mix. My mom and I relied on the pilot of the plane that brought us here today to do his job very carefully, in the same way that my dad and all the other passengers relied on the Veolia engineer to pay attention to the signals and drive the train according to all the important safety rules. Those rules said no cell phones and no unauthorized people in the driver's seat. The engineer's supervisors knew that he was using his cell phone while on duty. It is so hard for me to understand why they did not immediately investigate and put a stop to this. We learned that the engineer had been reprimanded recently before the collision, but then we learned that what he got in trouble for had nothing to do with text messaging or allowing kids to ride with him. It had to do with not bringing a train into one of the stations on time. This means that the company was concerned about profits and not about major safety issues and the hundreds and hundreds of safety violations that were going on. The truth is that the engineer's company took such a big gamble with my dad's and all the other passengers' lives. This was wrong. It is also wrong that in these unbelievable circumstances, Veolia is relying on the federal law that limits how much it has to reimburse all of its survivors for their injuries. My dad always taught me to accept full responsibility under any circumstances where I ever hurt someone. He never said, "Well, Mackenzie, just try to make things 30% or 50% better." My dad knew that being 100% responsible was not only fair to the person I hurt, he also knew that if I had to be fully responsible for any harm I caused, I would be more careful about my actions in the future. My family is so grateful to Congressman Gallegly for trying to fix this problem with legislation that would increase the damages cap. Congressman Gallegly has provided several opportunities for the survivors to meet one another, share our stories and suffering, and honor our loved ones. My family will appear before the judge soon and tell him about all of our losses. We have been trying to make it for 2.5 years without my dad's support, and we have a long road ahead. If there is no change in the law, or Veolia does not offer additional funds, the judge will have to determine some fair way to reduce each award so everyone's case fits inside the limit. I can only imagine how difficult this will be. Thank you for doing anything in the meantime to hold those who refuse to follow or enforce important safety rules 100% responsible for the harm they may cause, and also thank you for helping honoring my dad, Doyle Souser, and all of the others whose lives were taken or forever damaged by this tragedy.
Thank you very much, Mackenzie. You did a great job, and your dad would be very, very proud of you today. I understand there might be a couple of questions from members. The gentlelady from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and certainly, young lady, that took a lot of courage. And thank you for being so honest and so forthright. There's a couple of things that I have. One of them is indicating in the chart, and this is to Mr. Gallegly, is on the chart. Can you specifically say what does it say about the engineer's phone usage while he was actually driving the train? By the way, what time was the accident? What time of day?
4:42. Yeah, 4:42.
4:42. Is there any idea what time this individual started his shift? Well, because if he only went to that portion, then the rest of it would have been more messages.
The shift started about 3:30 when Mr. Sanchez boarded the train, and the train was on its way from the western San Fernando Valley into Ventura County with the first stop in Simi Valley. But if you look at this chart, these are the days that Mr. Sanchez was on duty. And by the way, we can go back and show charts like this for weeks before that Veolia was aware of. But just on the week preceding the tragedy, you can see this was the day that he worked, 70% of the time that he was texting was when he was operating the train. These were 2 days that he wasn't working. These were the only text messages he made. Blue indicate the number of text messages, which were like 10 and 10. But the day that he was on the train on previous Friday, 43 text messages. On Monday, about 55. On Tuesday.
So what does it say, Mr. Gallegly, about the man's usage of the cell phone? What are you indicating? What does that say?
I'm sorry?
What does it say? What is it, where are you pointing out to? What's the bottom line?
What I'm pointing out to is the blue line is the number of text messages that were made on these days. This line here is both the morning and afternoon shift when he was driving the train. So you can tell that clearly 2/3 to 75% of all the text messages that he was making was during the process of time while he was operating the train, not when he was at home or away on a day off. And on Wednesday of the week, 2 days preceding the crash, there were 184 text messages made and about 130 of those text messages were made while he was actually operating the train. And we moved to Friday, prior to 4:22, the time of the collision. He had made almost 100 text messages that day, with over 45 during the course of the time that he was driving the train. His shift would have lasted, I believe, until 8:35 that night, or at least another 4 hours, which would have probably indicated why there were fewer text messages on the day of the crash, was because he only operated the train up until the collision time.
Thank you. And if the actual damages, such as those medical expenses we've heard about, result from the tragedy, exceed the $200 million cap, who pay for the medical bills, and what options do the victims have? We only have a minute and a half.
Some of the victims have certain insurance, but all of the insurances have limitations or caps. But obviously when those caps run out, it's going to be the taxpayers and public hospitals and so on that are going to be paying this. And I might mention that of those 135 people that were seriously and critically injured, we have several that already have doctor bills over $1 million, haven't received anything to date, and in addition to that, many of these folks are going to require health care the rest of their natural life, many of whom were in their 20s and 30s and will never be able to work another day. We did have one person that had just graduated from medical school, and was ready to start being a doctor. She had half of her brain removed and was scarred permanently for life.
Thank you. I've always believed that the states should be allowed to regulate railroads in their areas where the federal government hasn't acted. We've tried that before, as long as it doesn't hurt interstate commerce, and we're still battling on that issue. But as you discussed in your statement, the cap is $200 million. However, Veolia could go beyond the cap and fully compensate all victims of the disaster. Do you know whether they have insurance coverage that could compensate the victims, and what amount of the insurance is?
My understanding is that they have, at the time of the crash, approximately $700 million in insurance for an accident like this. When I asked them about the issue of $200,000, they felt that 200 would more than adequately cover any potential tragedy, and I asked them if that was the case, why did they have $700 million worth of insurance, and I still am waiting for the answer to that.
I recognize Mr. Mike for